Mr. Matti. One moment, please. Let me share my screen. Mr. Matti Heikkurinen is a project portfolio manager at the CODATA Secretariat, affiliated with the University of Helsinki, with a strong background in strategic leadership, innovation management, and IT support for international science and innovation since the early 2000s. His work focuses on coordinating large-scale interdisciplinary and cross-sectional research initiatives that address global challenges through data-driven and open science. As project portfolio manager, he maintains an overview of CODATA's project activities, ensuring their synergy and alignment with CODATA's mission, while contributing to policy and management frameworks that enables innovation and societal impact. Prior to joining CODATA, he worked with organizations such as RDA Europe and the EGI Foundations. Mr. Matti, it's great to have you here.
Thank you very much. And sorry to just parachute in the middle of the session. So unfortunately, I didn't catch the whole presentation before me. So I don't know how much this overview of CODATA that I'd like to share with you, how well it actually ties with the previous presentation. I think some of the themes I heard towards the end that actually might be relevant. Let me just try to see if I can share my screen. Let's see. Okay. So we discussed briefly that I would present CODATA's history and activities, especially ones related to data interoperability and semantics, and also touching on legal and organizational interoperability, which hopefully doesn't result in anybody having to go to jail, that we might actually have a little bit less sort of extreme ways to allow also sharing of the information between different organizations. So CODATA was established in 1966 as a foundation in France, but it serves this global membership that includes national data committees, scientific academies, and so on. And it has this dual role. So it's a membership organization, but it also has a secretariat, so that and network of experts that can actually do these targeted projects looking into specific issues. We work with many partners, including the ISC, ISC members, UN agencies, and technical and standards organizations. And the mission is basically to connect data and people to leverage open science and open data to address global challenges. The way we split these activities, there is a data science and AI for science. So really looking into in detail how you describe the semantics of the data, how you can improve the reusability of the data based on sort of more and more coherent and comprehensive ways to describe it. So there are scientific publications. When we organized every 2 years this International Data Week event where experts can come together and discuss also in person these issues and so on. Then there's a policy side. So there is an International Data Policy Committee which can actually look into in-depth issues, for example, related to how the government data would be made available, or how it should be processed and so on, what should be allowed use cases and so on. One of the recent publications is Data Policy in Times of Crisis, which is very concise document, basically providing a checklist that if there's a crisis situation, what are the things that you should make sure that you can essentially have efficiency in the response, but at the same time respecting basic rights and so on. And then finally, making data work, which basically takes the data science and the policy work and uses them to address specific issues, typically in an externally funded projects, or then by developing frameworks like the cross-domain interoperability framework and so on. So looking into making data work in a little bit more detail. So the history, or short version of the history, is that almost 10 years ago, there were initial workshops looking into reuse of the data and how to better use it to address global problems. And based on this, a project called World Fair came into light. So there was a 3 years activity looking into how different disciplines, how they share data, how they make their data fair. And then after the end of the project, these activities basically continued in what we call the World Fair Plus. So there is a large group of projects looking to apply the project results and further develop the system that was developed there. So the case studies included chemistry, nanomaterials, and so on, which actually start to be quite close to the topic of this event, but also social surveys, cultural heritage, and so on. And with all of these disciplines, there was an analysis basically looking at the methods and so on. And now, based on this synthesis, which we call the cross-domain interoperability framework, was developed. And it basically breaks down the challenge of fair data and cross-domain interoperability into 5 different areas. So the core discovery essentially just tells that if you have a resource or repository, where do I find the metadata? How you can actually bring the data structures in a way that by having a single URI, you can basically get the data set and the metadata related to that. Then core access, what you can do with the data. So described in ODRL. Then controlled vocabularies, essentially describing what are the possible values for each of these fields in the data. Then data description, bringing a little bit more semantics into this. So basically, if you need to bring together 2 different data sets, where one, for example, you have address in a single field, and the other one has a street name and number, then this data description can actually help you to do this mapping. And finally, universals, just units of time. What is your day 0? Geography, units of measurement, are we talking about inches or centimeters and so on. And in addition to having advantage in a way of presenting consistent semantics, I think me sort of being more sort of on the management side, I think the advantage here is that you are breaking down the discussions that you have based on target groups. So core discovery, you probably want to discuss with the people who are maintaining and developing repositories. Core access, there is basically people who deal with licensing and so on. So you have this discussion that, okay, how do we want to allow people use this data set, and then describing that in a coherent way, and so on and so on. And then basically initially this was just released as a standard project deliverable, so big PDF file, but right now this has been turned into a website that you can actually access through this QR code. So you can find more information and also information about the ongoing developments and so on. Now, the other topic that we discussed, which was the legal and organizational interoperability. So what we like to call is the acronym, which is LOTS. So we have legal interoperability, organizational interoperability, technical interoperability, just sort of in a very sort of foundational level, and semantic interoperability. And all of these are obviously interlinked, but the key stakeholders that you need to talk to are different. So if you look at the legal interoperability, so you're talking with the chief legal officers. And of course, the ideal case, if you are talking about open research data, is that the legal use conditions are clearly and readily sort of described, so you can actually sort of see that, okay, this is something that I can use, I can access, and so on. Also that I'm allowed to create and use combined or derivative products based on these data sets. And you don't need to ask authorization in a case-by-case basis. Well, it usually turns out that reality, even in the best case, you might have licenses that are not compatible with each other, or they are not undefined, or the information is kind of this tacit information that, okay, we know that in this country, this kind of data set, it's really usable, but it's not really linked to the data set when you go to the website. You actually just have to know. And then, of course, the less best case, you might need the case-by-case authorization. It might be that the data is tagged that, okay, this was generated by a project, but the project is not a legal entity, so it's not really clear who is responsible and so on. And of course, the moment you cross national boundaries or even within a single country, you have administrative units, then you end up with the multiple legal frameworks. Then organizational interoperability, this is more like chief operating officer domain. So if you provide an open science resource, then and people build things, then how you describe it coherently, how long, what is sort of the warranty in a way, that how long this resource will be available, will it work tomorrow, will it work for 5 years from now, 10 years, who can actually get access, can I share access and so on. And then if something fails, how long will it take to recover? Now in Europe, there's an Open Science Cloud initiative, and here there's, let's say, some progress towards that. So we have some kind of service level agreement frameworks. We have a multi-node service monitoring and so on. But still, I think there's sort of lots of progress to be made. Also with aligning with different thematic infrastructures, for example, high energy physics and so on. And the challenge here is that this is very much a human process. If we need to analyze a memorandum of understanding between two organizations, then it is something that you just need to read the documents and understand, okay, can I trust this, can I use this, and so on. So these are the activities that we are looking into, especially in the context of the climate change adaptation, which is in a way surprising in a way, because initially you would think that this is all open data and so on, but once you really try to apply the data in the ground and assess the impact, then you run into privacy issues, security issues, and so on. So, so these things get a little bit complicated. Finally, some other CODATA activities. So we are working with the disaster risk reduction, so making these hazard information profiles, making them machine actionable, so that you can have a let's say JSON LD description of them, and you can also ensure that the format is correct and so on. Then we are working with the citizen science and also data-driven climate change adaptation. So this is the project that I referred to. So this was basically the quick overview that I prepared. So I'm happy to answer any questions or right now or through email if you have any.
Thank you, Mr. Matti, for such valuable insights. There are some questions in the chat. I can read them out for you. There's one question from Dr. Gitanjali Yadav. Thank you. She says, thank you for joining us, Matti. It is wonderful that you have experience with not only CODATA, but also RDA and other open groups on the global scale. Many of our attendees are early career researchers, and they would really gain from knowing how young people can join and contribute to the RDA. This is something we rarely discuss in natural sciences meetings in India. Would really appreciate your views based on your own vast experience.
Okay, so when it comes to RDA, anybody can join. It's free, so a personal membership is free, and then you could join different working groups and interest groups based on your interest. But of course, this is not really focused on early career researchers. There are some grant opportunities, maybe targeting on that. Then for CODATA, actually, I didn't mention this, but there is a targeted activities for early career researchers. There's a mailing list that you can find from the website. I'm happy to send a link afterwards to be sort of distributed. So let's say that there are some of these activities where you can find support, but I think also, especially when it comes to RDI, I would just encourage joining the RDI and the groups and participating actively in online discussions and so on.
All right. Another question from Dr. Gitanjali. Does CODATA have any mechanism for ECRs to contribute directly? Are there any fellowships or stipend internships that are available in the ecosystem for students from the Global South?
So my understanding is that at least for the International Science Week, there are from Global South, or let's say the grants for participation fees for individuals from Global South. So so I think in-person contributions are supported that way. And otherwise, let's say that if you are interested, I think contacting, for example, task groups chairs of CODATA, that I think many of them would be happy to involve people directly in those. It's not explicitly open in the same way as RDA, but I think if you can essentially make the case that why you are interested, I think most of the chairs would be very happy to hear from you.
Next question is whether you are managing any of the CODATA task groups or just projects, and could you explain the difference between these two?
Okay, so I'm not directly involved with the task groups, with the exception of the citizen-generated data one, and I think a couple of others. The difference is that typically a project you would have external funding body or more sort of short-term activity in a way with the very specific outputs and timelines. The task groups have a slightly different structure, typically based on volunteer contributions and driven by the chairs. So CODATA provides support for these chairs and facilitation in terms of, let's say, the administrative resources and so on. But it is less sort of, I would say, deterministic. So it is more sort of, it's research, community building, fact finding, and so on, and then coming up with recommendations. So so there is slight difference, but I think it's not always black and white.
All right. Next question is from Dr. Shwetank, and it's for Peter or Matti. With multi-omics, with multi-omic analysis becoming popular, the data generated holds answers to many insights, some of which the original investigator may not have thought of, but may come up with questions later. Where does the data sharing at the time of submitting the manuscript stand in this case?
Me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
This is a domain-specific problem, if I understand it. And each domain has its own problem. So I'm not very familiar with data in multiomics, but I believe that a number of scientific organizations do promote openness, particularly I think it was the ASBMB promoted the requirement to deposit proteomic data as part of your publication. But I'm not sure how common it is for other groups like this to do that sort of thing. It is absolutely the scientific societies who I think have the role of pushing this, but some of the scientific societies are very proactive in this, and some of them are extremely restrictive, of which I think the American Chemical Society is among the worst in preventing the use of data sharing.
So maybe
Well said.
just sort of add a little bit on that. A lot of this, I think, relates to incentives in a way. I mean, if I understood the question in a way that, let's say that I'm a researcher, I publish my data set, and somebody else produces a paper based on that. And I think in the current academic system, there is sort of, there's no sort of established way where you would show credit. I mean, you don't become co-author just by making data set available. I think some of these scientific disciplines where the data sharing is sort of the norm. I think this happens, and I think it's sort of seen as a good thing, I think, by everybody. But I think we are sort of looking at the way that, let's say, the whole, how do you assess the academic contributions? I think there is sort of issue there.
All right. The next question is from Dr. Peter himself. How can CODATA influence content creators to create interoperable content?
That's a good question. I guess we also have to ask that who are the commercial content creators, because I think if we talk about the traditional academic publishing, the content is actually created by researchers and then locked behind the publishers' paywalls. I think what happens in Europe is quite many of the funding agencies, they require some kind of open access system. So when it comes to publications, for example, then there's a requirement that you need to be able to make your papers, the manuscript, available for anybody who asks for it, and you can actually distribute it in a way. So there was quite a lot of discussion about how this works out exactly. When it comes to then sort of the data sets and so on, I think that might be sort of similar discussion there, but I think maybe less of a problem, because I think at the moment the commercial side is very much focused on publications. So I think maybe the sort of data sets, as far as I know, but I'm not sort of an expert there, but I think the locking the data sets behind the paywall, I think that might be a little bit less common.
I think what I was saying is some of the data sets are in proprietary formats, sometimes in binary format, and so it's the software producers and the knowledge producers who want to make these difficult to read.
Mm-hmm. So I think here, of course, sort of the cross-domain interoperability framework can be sort of one step in a way, first of all, by providing tools and hopefully providing examples on how these issues are resolved. Of course, dropping a binary file into a framework that is, let's say, nominally CDIF compliant doesn't really solve the problem. But I think, let's say, providing examples, promoting them, doing the policy work, basically encouraging governments that if they give grants, then ensuring that the data is reusable and so on. I think these are sort of these incremental steps that hopefully will address this problem.
All right. Here's another question for Peter or Matti. People still go for high impact factor journals, so their studies are given more value to. Till that thought is changed and perception towards scientists change, is it even possible to build a fully open source community? Then, isn't there a risk of scientists being undervalued?
Well, I've been tackling this problem for 20 years and I haven't found any answer. That we're in a prisoner's dilemma where it is in your own interest to go for the most prestigious journals, to pay lots of money if you've got it, which is divisive. But if your institution counts your value in terms of citations in high value journals, by the way, the high value is managed by commercial companies as well. It's not objective. It's done by companies which have an interest and which can be persuaded to give journals more ranking than they deserve just by commercial pressure. The whole thing is broken, and I don't know how to mend it.
This basically matches also my impression in a way that you have essentially you have a system that is well documented and how you get the tenure and so on. So I think in many cases you don't really have that much of a choice than play the game in a way.
And India and other global south countries suffer extremely badly.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Another question for you. How CODATA adhere to their fair data principle for electronic health records management, specifically on the context of data quality and research utility?
Well, in a way, CODATA has a facilitating role here. So I think we have activities collecting best practices related to electronic health records and so on. But as an organization, we are not managing data ourselves. So we can do case studies looking into how the fair data is actually addressed in these cases. But yeah, we don't do this directly ourselves.
Thank you. I see a few more questions. Is there any way to identify which data is authentic? And also, is there any one database which can be relied upon completely, especially for the health-related data?
I don't know, Peter, do you?
Yes, I think I would pay credit to the world's open biomedical data. I think that over the last 50 years, there has been brilliant work by all sorts of organizations. I'll pick PDB, Protein Data Bank, because I'm a crystallographer, and over 50 years or more, they have ensured that protein structures are deposited openly. They are verified, so you cannot publish it without data checks in terms of what's in it, what the quality is, and so on. And that was a key factor in the Nobel Prize for AlphaFold. Without those data banks, AlphaFold couldn't exist and work. So that's what happens in biomedical science. But in many fields of biomedical science, things are shut down. Instrument manufacturers have restrictive clauses on what you can do with their software. I'm not particularly involved, but there are instruments where you cannot interchange data because the manufacturers prevent it. There are, 100 good cases and 100 bad cases, or literally thousands of them. So there's no general answer to it. But good providers allow you to get the data and authenticate it and validate it. There's not one database. There are literally hundreds or thousands of databases in biomedical science in all sorts of fields.
Yeah, I think in general it would be very difficult to say that from the individual data set, how you can't really sort of say that this is authentic or not. So you kind of need to go to the source and assess the credibility of the source, what is the process that is used and so on. And I think same thing as with publications, you have retractions. Basically, you have a high quality journals where you have let's say quite rigorous peer review process, and still it happens that the paper is later on retracted because it actually turns out that there was, for example, some of the graphs were just basically drawn by hand, and so on. So this happens.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Matti and Dr. Peter, for sharing such valuable insights. Due to time constraint, we will now be moving forward to session 4. which is on accurate binding free energy predictions and drug discovery case studies by Dr. Viswanathan and Mr. Anbu.
Okay.
One second.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.